The Lord be with you. I had someone say to me this weekend that they'd never heard that greeting before and wanted to be sure they said the right thing when it was asked. That's part of coming into a new community, is finding out the new things and how to respond and how to be a part of that community. And here we are in the second week of our chapels together, and we start anew. Ben reminded us last week of the cosmos and where we were in it, putting our place firmly in the mind of God. We shared bread and the poured out blood of Christ to dedicate in communion this place to our service this year as scholars. Provost Sargent gave us a talk about connecting faith and learning. And Brad, that's not supposed to be me, that's supposed to be the PowerPoint now. If we can change to that, that'd be great. About connecting our life of learning, our life of scholarship, and our life of faith. And on Friday, we just sang and we prayed. We did those things as community together. For those who don't know me, I'm Michael Shasberger. I'm on your chapel card. That's my name. And I sit as the Adams Chair of Music and Worship here at Westmont, which is kind of funny because I don't really have a chair and I don't sit a lot. But other than that, I get to work here at Westmont, and I get to work with Ben and the chapel team to make chapel happen and music happen and things happen throughout our campus. And it's a delight to be there. Especially, it's a delight to be here in Murkison Gym. That's where we start. Let's remember that we don't turn this gym into a chapel so that God can come and find us here. Rather, we acknowledge that God is everywhere. And if we earnestly seek Him, we find Him in these places. We don't make it a chapel because we lift up the hoops and throw out the chairs. God was here when the hoops were down and the chairs were up. God was here when Ruth Kerr imagined a college on this campus, and this was a hillside. And God will be here a long time from now when this is something else. All we have to do is seek, because every place, every space is sacred if we seek God in it. And every time is sacred if we allow ourselves to be drawn into that time with God. God helps us know that we are in sacred places when we seek Him out. So, how do you act in a sacred space? Humbly. Perhaps more humbly than normal, because we know that we are confronting something so far above ourselves. And we're on slide 3 by now. Brad, that's okay. Just keep those moving along. Sacred spaces are places for the encountering of the Spirit, and we change them when our spirits change them. The Apostle Paul said that we find God, for in Him we live and move and have our being. Every aspect, every moment of our life is in that sacred space and in that relationship. The Westminster Catechism says, at the very front of teaching us how to be Christians, what is the chief purpose, the chief aim of man? And the answer is simple. Anybody know it? To glorify God and enjoy Him forever. That's our job. That's job one. You know, it's not your major. It's not your athletic team. It's not your musical pursuits. It's not your relationships with other people in this place. It's not the work-study position you have. It's not your internship. The chief number one job is to glorify God and enjoy Him and His presence forever. And that's what we're called to do. Well, we need to learn about how to do that and about some parameters about doing that together as a campus community, because we're forming a community. You don't just plop into a community. You have to craft it. And so today I've asked a guest to join me up here just to talk about chapel at Westmont, why it is we're called to be here, how we might be together in this place. Sort of like Conan or Stephen Colbert, I'm going to have a special guest come up. And Ben, would you join me up here? And we're just going to talk about worship and what it means to be community, to be and do chapel at Westmont. So Ben, the big question has to be for every entering student in our community, and probably a lot of people outside who don't understand us at all, why do we do chapel at Westmont?
Well, we do chapel because of where we are. Now, we've been using this metaphor. Planet Earth, Milky Way galaxy, we are always in God's presence, but there is a unique sense in which when we choose in special times and places to acknowledge that fact, that we really are in God's place. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. The world and all who live in it, Psalm 24:1. And for liberal arts college, that's really significant. That means that everything we study, we think about, we explore, has something to do with the God who made this place and whose place we're living and moving and having our being in. But there's another big reason for it, and that's because of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Christians for centuries have gathered together to learn and pray because of love. Love that brought God to send His one and only Son into the world to shed His blood for our sins and to make His own people. We're here because we don't want to forget the gospel. And the Scripture is really clear about this. We can have a great college, we can do all kinds of good and moral things, but without the love of God, we're just making a lot of noise. And so we want to remember the gospel, that God so loved the world that He gave His one and only Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. We love because He first loved us. And so these gatherings are about love, even more than they are about the immensity of the universe that we're trying to understand.
And the sense of reminder. When the very first universities were formed, they were often formed by clerics. They were formed out of the church. They were formed by people who knew that we needed to constantly remember why we were learning, what we were created for. And chapel's been part of the institution of the collegium, the university, since its conception. And it all leads us to that sense of day by day, Monday, Wednesday by Friday, week by week, reminding us that we're in the presence of God, that our learning is dedicated to God, and it leads us to an ultimate reunion with God that is all about just one thing, worship.
Yeah. And it goes back before the Christianity. It goes back to life in Israel. Communities gathered daily, 3 times usually, just to stop their work and to remember the God who made them who they were and who brought them into freedom. And Christ died. Go to the book of Revelation, but there are many other places you could go. And we're told that he died to make us worshipers. Paul, in his stinging indictment of human sin, he says in Romans 1, speaking of us and all of us, for though they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks to Him, but their foolish minds were darkened, and they began to worship other things. And the point is, what's wrong with the world is me and you. We have a tendency to forget God and to make ourselves our own little gods, and God made us for Himself. St. Augustine in his confession said, you made us for yourself, O God, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. And every human being has a restless heart until he or she finds the God for whom he or she was made. The church father Irenaeus puts it another way. He said, the glory of God is humankind fully alive. God is never more glorified than when those in whose image He made us glorify God. But then the life of humankind, the life of men and women, is the vision of God. That the glory of God is wonderful. It makes us fully human. And we move toward God's glory by moving in our capacity to worship Him.
Ben, we talk about Westmont being in the Protestant tradition, which doesn't cut out any connection from any branch of the Christian faith to this place. But one of the great moments and understandings that has come through that tradition is our place, not just as observers of worship, but as leaders in it. That concept of the priesthood of all believers.
Right.
That every one of us comes to chapel to work, to be a part of the expression of the community's faith, to lead, essentially. And we lead each other, we lead in singing, we encourage each other, and those are priestly functions, to be a part of bringing other people into faith and bringing them along in faith.
In fact, maybe for many of us, we don't normally use the word liturgy, but they're vast domains of Christianity where liturgy is very important. And the word liturgy it means the work, the service of the people. And whether you know the word liturgy or use it or think about it, whatever we do to the glory of God. But whenever we gather together and do something, we're performing a service to God, a liturgy. And so we're serving God by working, by studying, and we're also serving God by honoring Him.
I think one of the great... Yeah, there's a little humor spot in here somewhere that kind of smiles every time someone tells me they go to a non-liturgical church.
Yeah.
It's just impossible.
Ain't no such thing.
You can't. There is no such thing. You can't go to a church and not do something.
Yeah.
And that's all liturgy is the what we do and the work we do. But speak about work. Anybody in the room work? Raise your hand if you work. Yeah, good. Most of us have done that at least once or twice in our lives. And work is something that we sometimes just show up to because we have to. And it's hard. And maybe we don't want to go to work that day. I've had those days.
Hey, where are you going with this?
So what does that say for chapel when, we kind of have to go?
Yeah.
It's a requirement.
Yeah, how can you worship God when you have to?
When you have to show up, yeah.
And they made me do it. You
Yeah.
know. Well, no, you don't have to go to chapel unless you had to go to Westmont. Unless you were forced to come to this community, you're not forced to worship. But coming to this community, you made a choice to worship God regularly. Now, okay, that sounds like kind of snarky. Let me put it another way. It's our culture that has told us that freedom equals choice. You didn't choose to believe that choice equals freedom. You've been conditioned to believe that. In a sense, you were forced. You've been crammed into a mold culturally. We call it consumerism. And the idea, we're free to the degree we have more choices we have. But from the Bible standpoint, freedom is the freedom to do what you're supposed to do and have the power to do it. Choice. There's one kind of choice, which is what you do in the mood of a moment. And anybody can do that. My 18-month-old grandson, he's got that one down. He tries to do what he wants to do when he wants to do it. It doesn't take any maturity, any moral integrity to simply do what you want to do when you're in the mood to do it. But the big choices we make, the really important ones, are things we choose to do over a long period of time with a group of people, whether or not we feel like it. Now that's maturity. And communities like Westmont are built on that idea that we are in covenant with each other to do certain things together while we're here, whether or not we feel like it. And so this whole idea is, well, you made me go. Well, no. You chose to come to a place that says, we're going to do this together. And worship happens to be one of them. A great friend of mine dropped off one of his kids at Westmont this last weekend. Known this guy for 40 years, and I really admire him. And if you've met him, you would know why. He is a man of immense integrity. And he kind of scares people sometimes because he's just upright. But he's a wonderful father, a wonderful Christian man. And in one of my books, I told a story about him, and I reminded him of that when he dropped off one of his kids here at Westmont. He told me when he was about 17 or 18, he got a job, probably minimum wage, and it was a summer job. And very soon he realized he hated the job, and frankly, he wasn't being paid enough to do a job that he hated. So he started getting kind of slovenly in his work and just sort of just doing as little as he could get by with because, well, it was a stupid job, didn't like it, and he wasn't being paid enough to work hard. And as he tells the story, his father found out. I think his father was watching him work one day, and he pulled him aside. He said, "What are you doing? You're not working." He said, "Well, I don't like the job. It's really kind of a stupid job. I don't like the boss, and they're not paying me enough to do this." And his father got in his face. He says, "Wait, you promised to do this work for this amount of money, and no son of mine is going to do less than what he promised to do." And really shook up his son. Well, his son's now grown up, got some kids, and that made a big impression on me. When I saw him during orientation weekend, I reminded him of that story. And even as he's well into his 60s now, his face just became like flint. You know, he said, "That's so true." You know, and believe me, his family knows it's true.
No pressure on his son who's here.
No pressure.
No.
Son or daughter. We're not going to say
so
which.
we won't say.
Although that person knows exactly who I'm talking about right now. But you know, the choices you make in a covenant of marriage, in a covenant to be a student, be part of a community. That's the choice we're talking about.
And I think too, you know, the phrase, "He who is faithful over little will be faithful over much."
Right.
How small a task is it to come just 3 times a week to commit ourselves to something, like being in community, like worshiping, for the reward that is poured back on us in faithfulness and in strength and in building up of our faith. It's a powerful commitment. It's a powerful sense of work and worth that comes together in that.
But it's counterintuitive sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just don't always feel it. Also, I remember coming to Westmont. This is personal confession. The day I visited to interview, to candidate here at Westmont about 13 years ago, was the second time I had ever heard an electric guitar in worship.
Oh, it's terrible.
And the first time, I was just like, what is this? You know, I'm native to pipe organs and a cappella choirs and Sistine chapels and long-naved cathedrals and Latin, you know, and all kinds of different things that are just, that's, of course, you know. Yeah, it was shocking and riveting and very different. Somewhat foreign. It's not what I would call my heart language, but I see it and I understand that it is the heart language for many of us. And I have come to love the fact that people connect their spirituality so much in that expression of music. But how do we do that when we come from so many places with so many different expectations or traditions? To not be offended or put off or disenfranchised by the fact that you know, this is very different from my experience. Where are the tapestries? Where's the statuary? Where is the iconography? Where are the icons? Where are the hymn books? Where are the things that might be missed by some of us?
Yeah, you know, and that never occurred to me. I grew up in the Baptist church. You know, we're very amateurish. And the great thing here with Michael and me and Joel and the whole campus pastor's office is we don't always agree on what's the best kind of worship. We have a lot of good conversations. But what I love about working with Michael and Joel and Brad Elliott back there and Colleen is we do believe we want to find a way to enable and to encourage you to worship God with your whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so we're always kind of working out compromises. I think you'll see in the course of the year a lot of collaboration, say, between orchestra and choir and chapel worship band and different kinds of music. We work hard at it. We don't always succeed, but we love each other. And in fact, Michael put a question to some students one day. Well, he actually was telling about a church he had been visiting, and he met with the old people in the church, people my age, and said, "Do you love your kids?" And he said, "Oh, we love them. Would you do anything for them?" "Yes, I would." "Would you sing their music?" I got kind of quiet. But then he went to the younger people, Do you love your mom and dad and your aunts and uncles and the older ones? Oh, we love them. Would you do anything for them? Yes, I would. Would you sing their music? They got kind of quiet. So we're working on that one in chapel. Yeah.
And I think we all do, because one of the things we want for our community, we want for all of you, is to just open that book wider. So that the more places you go in the world, the more things you can access, the more things you can be versed in, the more ways of worshiping you can be comfortable and familiar and see as authentic,
right,
to be a part of that wider world. I mentioned in my opening comments, Ben, about how do you act in this new place, in this community of worshipers. How do we act humbly? How do we act respectfully? Some years we've done a rather corny chapel skit. That wasn't a criticism, Joel. It was just about texting and open laptops and walking up and down bleachers and public displays of affection and other things that might happen in chapel. How do you help us think about that, and how do you help us get out of the me into the we of corporate worship?
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right when you said God is no less present in a gym than he might be in the Notre Dame Cathedral. And he's not more present in the cathedral than he is in a gym. What makes the place special is what the people are doing there. And the great thing about cathedrals and some great architecture, it's easier to remember what you're doing. It's kind of hard here in this gym, but I would encourage you to think about the gym. Okay, it's not a cathedral, but what's going on here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday is the kind of things that goes on in a cathedral or a church you might visit on a Sunday. There are kinds of behavior that just aren't right or appropriate when people are gathered corporately to worship God.
Well, it's behavior that's happening literally in the face of God.
Yeah, like sort of in your face. But it's again, it's getting dangerous. I'm dancing on the edge of going like this, and I don't want to do that. But one thing I really have faith in is the good sense of Westmont students. And surely, if you stop and think about what's going on when we gather for worship, would you do some of the things you might be doing already? Chatting, having your laptop open, nothing's more public than clomping down the steps to go to the restroom and then coming back in and clomping back up the steps. Maybe you would come up with other plans.
We're going to have some seats in the back, I understand.
Yeah, we'll do stuff like that.
For folks that just have to leave, so they can just slip back in and sort of be humble and anonymous back there.
But I'm speaking to people that I think you guys are on board. I don't think anyone here wants to get in the way of good things. So let's work together on this and treat each other with great respect, especially when we're worshiping the true and living God.
Big themes, seems to me, are show up with an open heart, with a capacity, Kapax Day, a capacity to know God, a capacity to know each other, to respect and support each other in worship, maybe every now and then to remind each other, to be helpful supporters of each other in worship, to sing fully, to pray fully, to listen fully. Sometimes I think we don't think that listening is an act of worship, and it's a huge part of how we hear and interpret and process the Word to keep those things alive.
Yeah, it's really about love, loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. And what's going on when we gather here? Well, how can we love each other? And I think we'll come up with good answers to that.
Ben's going to speak on Friday, and he's going to lay out the season for us together. What we're going to be focusing on, what our theme for chapel is going to be for the rest of the year. We have some incredible guests coming to speak on the theme of our chapel that is really a pattern for us all to see more and more effective ways for each of us to worship. We've done a bunch of study this summer on this theme and some reading and invited guests to speak on it, and Ben's going to react to the guests and interact with the guest speakers and have a wonderful opening for all of us to the heart of God. And that pattern is going to be tremendous. So come Friday and hear the story, hear the plan, and then walk with us through the season of opening different chapters, different ways, different modes of worship, different approaches. Ben will coin it with a special phrase on Friday and lay it out for us to help us see where we're going and how we're going to track this path together.
Right.
I don't know if you know it, but for the last 20 minutes, you've had the opportunity to, and I hope you have been worshiping. I hope you have been actively working, participating with us to answer the questions that we threw back and forth, to engage in the idea of what it means to be in the midst of us together and worshiping together. And Joel and the band is going to help us finish that today by closing in song. Joel?